In a moment that shook the monarchy to its core, Princess Anne, known for her stoic silence, stood before Parliament's royal committee and thundered 5 chilling words. "We must protect the crown." But this wasn't a plea. It was a warning, an ultimatum. What forced the princess to break royal protocol? Who was she protecting the crown from? And why now? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began with a call behind closed doors, a confidential session summoned by the royal committee amid whispers of constitutional instability. Members of Parliament, expecting dry debate and careful counsel, were stunned when Princess Anne appeared without announcement, flanked not by aides, but alone. Her face betrayed no emotion, but her presence was enough to silence the room. For decades, Anne had remained the monarchy's anchor in chaos, disciplined, resilient, and silent. But on that day, silence gave way to fire. With a calm yet commanding tone, she addressed the room not as a ceremonial figure, but as a soldier of the crown. "The monarchy is under siege," she said, "and it is not from the outside, it is from within." The Princess Royal was making it unmistakably clear something had gone terribly wrong at the heart of Britain's royal institution. Whispers had circulated for weeks, rumours of manipulation, covert influence, and internal fractures among the royal family. But Anne's appearance confirmed what many feared, that the crown itself had become a battleground. She did not read from notes. She didn't ask for permission. What she delivered was a message rooted in urgency, fear, and a quiet rage that had clearly been building for some time. Her eyes reportedly scanned the room, pausing on those she believed complicit or complicitly silent. "We cannot allow politics to devour principle," she added. "The soul of the monarchy is being bartered behind curtains. That ends today." The committee, already grappling with divisions between traditionalist and modernist factions in the House, suddenly found themselves entangled in royal warfare. Some MPs were visibly shaken, others confused, but no one left that chamber unaffected. Royal aides standing nearby were seen holding back tears. One was later quoted anonymously saying, "We'd never seen her like that before. She wasn't pleading for the crown. She was defending it." News broke within hours, despite strict embargoes, with headlines scrambling to decipher the meaning behind her words. But for those paying close attention, it wasn't just a defense of royal dignity, it was a confrontation against betrayal. And the timing? Not accidental. Insiders revealed that Anne had learned of a covert effort to shift influence within the monarchy just days prior. A betrayal, decades in the making, orchestrated from within palace walls and disguised as modernization. Now, with the monarchy's eldest daughter calling out the storm before it fully arrived, Britain was left wondering what could possibly drive the most loyal royal to deliver an ultimatum in the seat of Parliament itself. What secret was so dangerous it pulled Anne from the shadows and into the spotlight? What, or who, had provoked her to say, "Enough"? But what explosive tension drove the most disciplined royal to issue an ultimatum that could unravel everything? The answer lies in a growing war few ever saw coming. Beneath the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, whispers echo louder than orders. For months, secret factions have formed within the royal household, and now, sources say they've turned against each other. Princess Anne's ultimatum wasn't the beginning, it was the climax of a war she's been fighting in silence. While the public clung to images of unity, behind closed doors, the cracks were splitting wide open. At the center of this hidden conflict were two opposing forces, one rooted in preservation, the other in radical change. Princess Anne had long stood at the helm of the traditionalists, a faction deeply loyal to the core values instilled by Queen Elizabeth. For her, duty was not a slogan, it was blood deep. But as Charles ascended the throne, another group began to rise, cloaked in modernism and fueled by quiet ambition. Their goal, insiders reveal, was to remake the monarchy into a softer, more populist institution. And behind this wave of reform stood Camilla's most trusted advisors, quietly guiding the new narrative from within. They spoke of evolution. Anne saw it as erosion. Whispers soon turned into sabotage. Internal memos began to disappear. Plans approved by Anne's team were suddenly scrapped or leaked to tabloids. One particularly sensitive proposal tied to Catherine's charitable foundation was buried under fabricated claims of mismanagement, only to reappear rebranded under another name days later. It wasn't just politics, it was personal. The sabotage became so brazen that several royal aides walked out, but not without signing strict non-disclosure agreements that silenced them from speaking to the press. One former advisor, under anonymity, claimed there were two palaces operating under the same roof, and neither trusted the other. Anne's frustration mounted as Charles, increasingly overwhelmed by the pressures of transition, leaned more on external advisors, whose allegiance to the crown was questionable at best. These outsiders began influencing everything from royal engagements to who had access to the king himself. Decisions that once belonged to blood now belonged to whispers. Anne watched as age-old traditions were sidestepped in favor of headlines and optics. It was a betrayal she couldn't openly fight until now. Those who knew her best said the Queen's death triggered something deeper within her. Elizabeth had been the final thread holding the fragile balance intact. Without her, Anne feared the soul of the monarchy was being quietly auctioned off behind velvet curtains. And through it all, Anne remained outwardly composed, but the cost was heavy. Allies watched her grow colder, more withdrawn. One close friend described her as an iron wall under siege. Her silence wasn't cowardice, it was calculation. Every word, every move, was stored until she could strike when it mattered most. And that moment had finally come. The ultimatum she delivered was not born in a day. It was the result of months, perhaps years, of holding back a tide she no longer believed could be stopped from within. And while Anne battled shadows in silence, a storm was gathering beyond palace gates, one that would bring Parliament directly into royal affairs. In a twist never before seen in modern history, Parliament moved to question the relevance and control of the monarchy. Behind closed doors, discussions turned to succession clauses, asset reallocations, and unprecedented oversight. But what triggered such bold action? And why did Anne see this as an existential threat? It began quietly, documents drafted in hushed committee meetings, shielded from media glare, buried under vague titles and coded language. Parliament's Royal Committee, empowered after the Queen's passing, initiated a secret review of the Crown estate, its governance, its reach, and most alarmingly, its future distribution. Anne had seen rumblings of constitutional curiosity before, but this was different. These proposals weren't harmless explorations, they were blueprints for dismantling centuries of royal autonomy. Even more alarming, leaked pages revealed hints that key roles within the royal hierarchy were marked for realignment. Camilla's name, curiously, was never under review. Catherine's, however, was conspicuously absent, stripped of strategic mentions, as if erased from the long-term vision. It was a warning, and Anne received it loud and clear. What made matters worse was the realization that these ideas didn't come solely from radical reformists. Anonymous MPs, some claiming to support the monarchy, had begun feeding stories to the press, carefully curating public doubt. Headlines questioning the royal budget, the purpose of titles, even the succession order began surfacing with uncanny coordination. Behind the media storm, Anne detected a pattern, a campaign not against the monarchy's structure, but against its future. And the future, in her eyes, was being hijacked by those with their own agendas. Then came the whisper that changed everything. A senior insider from the committee, someone Anne had once worked with during national service initiatives, reached out in private. What he revealed wasn't speculation, it was confirmation. There were motions drafted to strip certain royals of their ceremonial powers in exchange for increased government oversight. The language was veiled in diplomacy, but the intent was undeniable. Weaken the crown to strengthen parliamentary image. The monarchy wasn't just at risk of reform, it was being politically maneuvered into irrelevance. Anne understood the weight of silence. She had worn it for decades. But this moment called for disruption. To act meant confronting the machine head-on. To remain quiet meant watching the crown become a puppet. Her decision wasn't rushed, it was righteous. This wasn't about protecting tradition for nostalgia's sake. It was about safeguarding the institution from becoming a convenient target in a game of political optics. The royal family, with all its flaws, had always been more than symbolism to Anne. It was a legacy of service, unity, and sacrifice. That legacy was now under siege, and the public, so often fed curated headlines and orchestrated distractions, had no idea how close the country had come to a quiet constitutional coup. As Anne prepared to speak, she knew the stakes weren't just ceremonial, they were existential. And this time, it wasn't her name she was fighting for. But for Anne, protecting the institution wasn't just about policy, it was about people. And one name, in particular, forced her hand. When reports emerged that internal briefings labelled Catherine as a volatile wildcard, unfit for succession influence, Princess Anne was done watching silently. It was no longer just about royal traditions, it was about justice for a woman Anne saw as the monarchy's future. And that's when things truly turned. The dossier arrived quietly, slipped into the hands of Parliament's Royal Committee under the guise of internal concern. Its tone was clinical, but its intentions were venomous. Sourced from anonymous palace staff, it questioned Catherine's judgment, her emotional stability, and even her loyalty. It presented selective incidents, twisted half-truths, and veiled suggestions that she was too unpredictable to be trusted with long-term influence in royal strategy. But the most appalling detail, it cited her recent health struggles, private, deeply personal moments weaponized as evidence of weakness. For Anne, this was the breaking point. It wasn't policy anymore. It was character assassination. And worse, it reeked of an orchestrated campaign designed to sideline the one woman she believed could carry the monarchy forward. Behind palace doors, there had been tension before, but never this level of calculated malice. Anne immediately suspected the dossier's fingerprints didn't belong to outsiders, but to insiders threatened by Catherine's quiet power. Unlike others, Catherine never chased titles. She earned respect through restraint, loyalty, and grace under pressure. But her refusal to play the political game made her a target for those who did. Anne's rage was cold and controlled, but it burned hotter than ever. She confronted several senior aides, only to be met with blank expressions and strategic ignorance. That silence said everything. She wasn't imagining the war. It was real, and it was personal. The betrayal, however, did not go unanswered. In hushed corridors, Anne found unlikely allies. Princess Beatrice, who had kept a respectful distance from most internal drama, quietly voiced her support, calling the dossier despicable. Sophie Wessex, dignified and often underestimated, stood firm beside Anne, declaring it a line that should never have been crossed. Their solidarity was private but powerful, a quiet force rallying behind Anne's moral stand. Still, no move was more pivotal than Anne's private visit to Catherine just days before her confrontation with Parliament. The two women, often portrayed as distant, sat in a sealed room for over an hour. When Anne emerged, her expression was pale and unreadable. But one aide recalled hearing her say under her breath, "She doesn't deserve this. None of it." What struck Anne most during that meeting wasn't Catherine's pain, it was her composure. Despite the storm of lies around her, Catherine refused to lash out. She didn't ask for protection. She didn't plead for defense. She simply asked one question: will the truth matter in the end? That single moment, that quiet dignity, became Anne's final push. Catherine wasn't just a casualty of palace politics, she was a symbol of what the monarchy should be: honest, unshakable, graceful under fire. And if no one else was going to protect her, Anne would. But Anne's defense of Catherine would set off a chain reaction, one that forced even King Charles to confront ghosts he had long buried. While Parliament plotted and the palace split, the king stood paralyzed, torn between loyalty to his wife, allegiance to his sister, and fear of a legacy slipping through his fingers. And when Anne finally confronted him, what unfolded was a royal sibling clash no one was meant to witness. King Charles had always been a man of contemplation, of quiet compromises and behind-the-scenes decisions, but in recent months, that quiet had transformed into hesitation. While palace aides whispered, committees schemed, and alliances shifted, Charles stayed seated watching. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he was drowning in the complexity of it all. His crown, still fresh upon his head, felt heavier by the day. His instincts told him to stay out of the fray, to let time sort the politics. But time, Anne knew, was the enemy. With every hour of silence, trust eroded and lines hardened. And so, she did what no one else had dared. She marched into his private chambers and made her position unmistakably clear. Her voice, though steady, carried the force of generations. "If you stay silent, you choose a side," she told him. There was no fury in her words, just truth sharpened like a blade. Charles, unprepared for the confrontation, was said to be visibly shaken. For decades, Anne had been the quiet enforcer of tradition, never demanding the spotlight, never overstepping her rank. But now, she was done waiting for leadership that refused to lead. The king's gaze reportedly fell to the floor as she spoke, words hitting him harder than any public scandal ever could. Because Anne wasn't just speaking as a sister, she was speaking as the last true sentinel of their mother's legacy. The ghost of Queen Elizabeth loomed large in that room. Insiders later shared that Anne reminded Charles of her final words, simple yet thunderous: "Hold the family together, or it will fall apart." And in that moment, Charles was forced to face what he had become, a monarch adrift, a man surrounded by noise, but too afraid to silence it. He had allowed his court to fracture, let advisors whisper in place of direction, and turned away when his own blood called out for help. Anne's defiance wasn't a rebellion, it was a rescue mission, but she needed the king to wake up before it was too late. The emotional weight of that conversation was undeniable. One aide, sworn to discretion, admitted to hearing muffled weeping behind the closed door. He knew Anne was right, they said, and that realization broke something inside him. For the first time since his coronation, Charles realized the true battle wasn't out there in Parliament or within public perception. It was within his own house, within his own heart. Torn between Camilla's careful counsel and Anne's moral reckoning, the king stood at a precipice, but the clock was ticking, and the cost of indecision was now threatening the very institution he was crowned to protect. As the monarch faltered and the crown teetered, Anne prepared her final card, a public move no royal had dared make in generations. They tried to silence her. They tried to delay her. But on the morning Parliament convened to discuss royal oversight, Princess Anne strode into the chamber, eyes blazing. What followed was a thunderous declaration, and 5 words that would ignite shockwaves through every corner of the realm. "We must protect the crown." It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Security had been briefed, media access had been restricted. The Royal Committee expected a quiet, closed-door review session, a technical debate, not a battlefield. But Anne was never going to play by their schedule. Dressed not in ceremony but in conviction, she entered without announcement. There were no cameras to capture her stance, no official statement to distribute. But the walls had ears, and someone inside hit record. What they captured was not the diplomacy of a royal, it was the roar of a protector. Anne began with history, invoking the royal oaths of her ancestors, words not spoken in Parliament in over a century. She called out, by name, the danger of infiltrators in velvet gloves, those who sought to hollow out the monarchy under the guise of progress. Then, without hesitation, she defended the 2 figures who had become the heart of this silent war, Catherine and William. Her voice did not waver as she said, "Their loyalty has never been for sale. If you punish them for that, you punish the crown itself." The room, seasoned with political veterans and skeptical lawmakers, fell into stunned silence. She didn't stop there. Anne turned to the MPs and issued a challenge that echoed across the chamber. "Do not dismantle what you don't understand." She described a monarchy not as a museum relic, but as a living symbol of continuity, forged in sacrifice. "This crown," she said, has buried kings, survived wars, and healed nations. Do not make the mistake of thinking it cannot outlast your ambitions. One insider said you could hear a pin drop. Another claimed certain MPs appeared visibly shaken, others furious, but none interrupted. By the end of her speech, it was no longer just a defense. It was a declaration of resistance. Within hours, the leaked audio spread like wildfire. The public, who had only heard rumors of Anne's growing unrest, now had proof of her power. Social media lit up with a single message: "Number Anne rises." A second followed just as fast: "Number protect the crown." The palace issued no comment, neither did Parliament, because there was nothing to spin. The truth was unfiltered. The fight was now undeniable. But Anne's war wasn't over yet. Because the forces behind this threat weren't only political, they were personal. And their next move was ruthless. Within hours of Anne's speech, a smear campaign exploded across the tabloids. Private letters, doctored footage, and whispered innuendo all targeted at discrediting Anne, Catherine, and their allies. Behind the curtain? Camilla's once silent inner circle, now activated and dangerously emboldened. It was swift, calculated, cruel. The kind of attack only possible from those who had studied the system long enough to know exactly where to strike. Confidential royal correspondences, never meant for the public eye, suddenly appeared on the front pages. Letters from Anne, taken out of context, twisted to paint her as divisive and unstable. Headlines screamed betrayal. Op-eds dissected her motives. But it didn't stop there. A video surfaced grainy, clearly manipulated, showing a much younger Catherine mid-discussion in a private setting. The footage was deliberately edited, cutting out context, emphasizing emotion, and leaving the viewer with one insidious suggestion: that she was emotionally unfit for the role she'd been silently preparing to inherit. Social media erupted, but this time it wasn't organic. Analysts later revealed waves of bot accounts, strategically timed posts, flooding platforms with hashtags like #UnfitAnne and #QuestionCatherine, while suspiciously favorable narratives about Camilla's stability and modern leadership trended simultaneously. Behind it all, a clear pattern emerged. Someone was orchestrating an attack not just on individuals, but on their credibility, their legacies, and their very place in the monarchy. And it wasn't just about silencing dissent, it was about rewriting the royal future. The tipping point came when a high-ranking palace staff member was abruptly suspended. The official reason was labelled breach of protocol, but insiders confirmed the truth was far more damning. This individual had direct ties to the leaked documents and unauthorized access to the footage now haunting the headlines. The trail of digital fingerprints couldn't be erased fast enough, but the damage had already been done. William, until then measured and diplomatic, was reportedly incandescent with rage. In a private meeting, he slammed the door and said, "They've gone too far this time." For a man who had built his public persona on calm, that moment was seismic. The betrayal of his wife, the assault on his aunt, the corrosion of trust from within it had become personal. Yet in the midst of this chaos, the woman at the center of it all remained unmoved. Anne, when informed of the full scope of the smear campaign, didn't blink. She was heard saying only 6 words. "Let them come. I'm not done." That defiance, that unwavering resolve, signaled one truth louder than any headline could scream: the crown was not surrendering, not while Anne stood. With reputations on the line and the monarchy dangling between survival and implosion, one last royal power had yet to speak, and when she did, the entire game changed. After months in the shadows, Catherine, now at the eye of the storm, broke her silence in a quiet but devastatingly powerful message. She didn't name names, she didn't assign blame, but her words echoed louder than any scandal. It was brief. No televised statement, no royal press conference, just a written message released with deliberate simplicity, shared first through official royal channels, then picked up by every media outlet in the country within the hour. For weeks, Catherine had been dragged through the mire of innuendo, betrayal, and staged narrative manipulation. She had been called too emotional, too quiet, too guarded, too much of a threat. But in just 11 words, she reclaimed every inch of ground taken from her. "I serve the crown, not myself." That single line was more than a response. It was a declaration of allegiance, not to power, not to revenge, but to the institution she had always believed in, even as it tried to devour her. The message hit with the force of a royal reckoning. Analysts dissected every syllable, but it was the silence between the lines that revealed the most. There were no accusations, but her words were soaked in quiet defiance. "My role has never been about recognition," she wrote. "It has always been about service, and in moments like these I remember who I serve and why." It was impossible to ignore the subtext, a warning cloaked in humility. A reminder to her detractors that while they played games of optics and manipulation, she remained unmoved, unbought, unbroken. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Approval ratings surged overnight. Commentators, once skeptical of her, now praised her restraint, her dignity, her calm strength in the face of coordinated humiliation. Even critics who had sided with modernization found themselves swept up by a tide of empathy and admiration. The same tabloids that had run smear stories began to backpedal, sensing the shift in public sentiment. On social media, her message trended for 2 consecutive days. But this wasn't about popularity. This was about positioning. And behind the curtain, shifts began to occur. Inside the palace, something changed. Charles, who had spent weeks paralyzed by pressure, finally acted. Quietly, without announcement, senior roles were reassigned. Advisors linked to the leaks were given early retirements. Strategic meetings were restructured. The king, it seemed, had heard Anne's warning and seen Catherine's resolve, and was beginning to make moves that suggested he no longer trusted the voices that had once surrounded him. This wasn't a coup, it was a correction. But as the dust began to settle, a final document, long buried, long forgotten, would redefine everything Anne had fought for. In the chaos of succession and crisis, one document had gone unnoticed, sealed by Queen Elizabeth herself. Unveiled in the wake of Anne's rebellion, it contained one final safeguard, one final instruction, and one name that would anchor the monarchy's future: Catherine. It was found, tucked deep within the royal archives, inside a secured envelope marked with the Queen's personal seal, only to be opened in case of constitutional conflict within the family. The timing was eerie. The nation stood divided. The crown teetered. And Anne had just ignited the most public reckoning the monarchy had faced in generations. When the envelope was opened, what lay inside was not policy, but prophecy. Elizabeth's words, written in her own hand, were startlingly clear. Trust Anne. Protect Catherine. Preserve the crown. It wasn't a will. It wasn't an order. It was a final act of foresight from a monarch who knew, long before anyone else, that a fracture was coming. The letter's contents were reviewed by legal scholars and constitutional experts. While it held no binding legislative power, its symbolic authority was unmatched. This wasn't a statement from an advisor. It was a Queen's final insurance policy, hidden from the political theatre that had consumed the institution she loved. For years, the public saw Elizabeth as the steady matriarch. But this single letter revealed something deeper, an awareness of internal vulnerabilities, of shifting allegiances, and of the potential for betrayal from within. When Anne read the document, those closest to her said she broke down in tears for the first time in years. She held the letter close, whispering words no one else could hear except one staff member who claimed to catch a fragment. She knew this day would come. In that moment, it wasn't just validation, it was vindication. All the silence, all the resistance, all the warnings dismissed as old-fashioned discipline, it had all led to this. The late Queen hadn't just trusted Anne, she had entrusted her with a mission beyond duty, to guard the legacy when others tried to dismantle it. And Catherine, the name that appeared like a beacon in Elizabeth's final words, stood not just as a symbol of continuity, but of renewal. The revelation of the document silenced much of the noise. Even critics of the monarchy were forced to reckon with its weight. It wasn't staged. It wasn't leaked for damage control. It was a relic of foresight that shifted the tone of an entire institution. Quietly, without spectacle, the monarchy began to stabilize. Charles, now fully aware of how close the institution had come to collapse, moved with new resolve. The fractures remained, but they no longer spread. Instead, they began to close. And so, with enemies revealed, loyalties tested, and truths unearthed, one woman's public ultimatum may have saved the crown itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.